Funding for this program was provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.
Her art is unmistakable, her sense of style unforgettable. Mignon Faget thrives on the culture and traditions of her birthplace, New Orleans. The descendant of 5 generations of physicians, Mignon's mother's family came to the Crescent City during the French Revolution. Her father's family, plantation owners from the West Indies.
She's from this wonderful Creole family. She's got that exquisite Creole name. The family history tracks that of New Orleans. I mean, I feel like Mignon gets her nourishment from Louisiana.
One of the reasons that I admire about her is that she is the penultimate New Orleanian and reflects the elegance and the history of the city and the traditions and the culture.
Mignon Faget's formal training in the arts began with a fine arts degree from Sophie Newcomb College. She furthered her studies in Europe and at the Parsons School of Design in New York. In 1969, she introduced her first ready-to-wear collection in New Orleans, where the local boutique clientele and the art world eagerly devoured her work. Designing accessories seemed to follow naturally, sculpture for the body, and Mignon used nature as her muse.
I think she's taken all the things about Louisiana that we love, from things from the sea, things from our plants, things from our architecture, and she deconstructs them and turns them into beautiful works of art for everyone to enjoy.
She is a student of archaeology, and she's gone to Mexico many times and researched the plant life in Mexico and also the architectural ruins. And these things really reflect in her jewelry and her artwork.
Mignon's artwork is her love, and the enterprise she's built to showcase it shows the metal she's made of as a businesswoman. From a small studio with a handful of employees in the Riverbend section of New Orleans, the enterprise now includes 3 galleries in that city and 1 in Baton Rouge. Mignon's 3 children have now followed in their mother's footsteps. Daughter Jacqueline and son William are artists. Son John works with Mignon. Following Hurricane Katrina, in one of many philanthropic gestures over the years, Mignon dedicated a portion of profits from the sale of her signature fleur-de-lis jewelry to the New Orleans Rebirth Fund.
She's the best example that I can find in the state of the need and the ability to get artists to work, and not only to create an image for Louisiana, but to create business as well. She's the best example we can find, and I love her for it.
Her works have garnered many awards, and her career was honored with a retrospective exhibition at the historic New Orleans collection. Artist, businesswoman, philanthropist, Mignon Faget is a legend who allows Louisiana to express itself through her work. Hello, I'm your host, Beth Courtney, and we are here with Mignon Faget at the fabulous Historic New Orleans collection, where her wonderful exhibit celebrating her art and her life, 40 years as an artist. Mignon, doesn't seem possible. Welcome to Louisiana Legends. It is our privilege to be with you today, and it's really sort of breathtaking to see all of this jewelry collection and all of your work and design. How does it feel to have a collection for 40 years here?
It's pretty astounding to me, and I've learned so much about what I've been doing for the last 40 years by helping the curator learn about the work. It took us, I think, about 8 months to finally get everything all the story told, actually, the story.
I today wore, of course, my gumbo necklace because it's one of my favorite pieces, and I was looking at, and it has some of the elements that you're known for in your design, but certainly you have brought a little bit of New Orleans and Louisiana to the rest of the world with your design, and your roots run very deep here. Is it true that you're a fifth generation?
I am, yes. Both families, my mother's family and my father's family, were here since the 1700s. Around the time of the French Revolution, my father's family were in Saint-Domingue, and when the insurrection occurred, the slave insurrection, they left and went to Cuba and then to New Orleans. So it was before statehood, and I have the wedding band of the first generation, and it's an Alliance band, and it's from 1803.
As a young girl growing up, were you aware that you lived in a very unique city and you were affected by your surroundings that helped create maybe your sensibilities?
I was, actually, because my father liked to tell stories, and he would talk about the background of the family, about his uncle and about his great uncle, who was a doctor. They were all doctors. And his generation, they were all doctors. But going back to the firstborn in Louisiana, he was a doctor, Jean-Charles Faget. He was very involved in finding the cause of yellow fever. He discovered a sign, a diagnostic sign, and it's named the Faget sign.
Oh, now that's so interesting.
Yeah, it's very funny because around our dinner table, we talked about things like carving cadavers, and because my siblings were all dentists, so they would talk about their experiences. My father would talk about his experiences, and in the summertime, if I was a good girl, he would take me on his calls. Not into the houses, of course. I'd wait in the car, and then he would tell me stories about what was wrong with the patient, and yeah, I was feeling very important about that. So I really like to investigate and know how things work, and I think that comes from having scientists in my family.
But when you decided to go to, you were at Newcomb, then you were studying fine arts, but you like sculpture. I mean, that is sort of representative art, then, if you will. So why did you choose that particular form at Newcomb?
Well, I think the white canvas always scared me. And also, I like the tactile quality of sculpture. And you don't get that with some media like painting. And but it was mainly this blank canvas that was like, where do I start? What do I do? Whereas if you have something in your hand and you're bending wires, and it's more friendly, at least for me.
Well, certainly for you. When I was looking at some of your biographical information, I realized that after you've graduated from Newcomb, you did go to Paris, or you went to Paris as part of your training, and that must have been a wonderful experience.
Oh, yes, it changed my life. There are two pictures in the show, the exhibit. One is of me on the Ile-de-France on my way over to France, and the other one is on the Ile-de-France again on my way back, and it looks like two entirely different people. I look very innocent and wide-eyed in the first one, and the second one, it's like Miss Sophistication, But it does that, being exposed, and I traveled a lot when I was over there. I went to Italy and to England and to Spain and Austria, Germany. I did as much traveling as I could. And I had a certain amount of freedom, at least in my mind, because I had gotten my degree, so I didn't feel that compelled to study or work quite as hard as I had
But you were life experiences and looking at design things.
Yeah.
Did you see designs wherever you were looking to? Did you, at that time, were you looking at perhaps in the museums and things, or were you looking at nature at that point?
No, I was dedicated museum goer, and I went to all the big museums in Europe, and I went to galleries in Paris. In fact, the very first piece of sterling silver jewelry that I had ever noticed was in a little gallery called Fin de Siècle on Boulevard Saint-Germain-des-Prés. And it was next door to my favorite cafes.
Perfect.
I used to go in there all the time, and there were these beautiful pieces from Copenhagen mostly. So George Jensen was emerging as a very popular silver designer, not only in flatware but in jewelry. And I think that sort of got tucked away in my mind, and I actually bought a set of a necklace and a pair of earrings from this gallery. I saved up all my little francs, and so that was a contemporary set of jewelry.
You know, though, when we look back in this 40 years of design and everything, one of the first things you did, though, was you designed clothes. You designed, why that, do you think?
Well, I had been designing my clothes since I was a small child, actually. My mother sewed and let me decide what I wanted. And I didn't realize what freedom she was giving me and how she was letting me learn how to do this. She would take me to Krewes. They always had this huge, fabulous fabric department. And she let me choose the fabric, and she was innovative, very, very innovative. So we would take a pattern that kind of looked like what I wanted for the top, and then match it up with something else that was a different pattern, and she would put things together in that way, and voila, she would come out with all these wonderful dresses. And when I was in high school, I had the most fabulous, high school and college, gowns, ball gowns, because I used to go to a lot of movies, and that was, you know, the
You were
whole
dramatic.
Elizabeth Taylor.
That's
and
right.
I had a lot
Absolutely.
of dramatic clothing.
It says you consider yourself a fashion designer, so what does that mean exactly to you?
A designer is a designer. Fashion is a field of design, and it has to do with clothing as it reflects the mode of the time. You know, it's a very interesting history, fashion history, as it reflects the political, the cultural, the place and time that it was created.
Early on, though, your fashion design and jewelry seems to begin with nature and shells and early. Is that correct? Is that some of the earliest pieces?
Well, I was actually doing collections of clothing, and I was concentrating on that, and I just got an idea to accessorize a particular collection. And I had a big collection of shells. I used to collect shells on the beach, on the Gulf Coast beaches, near the Florida-Alabama border.
Right.
And this was before the days of the high-rise, just little cottages. And actually, I would stay in a place called Perdido Bay, which is on the backside. And I just took a sand dollar, and I always thought they were beautiful. And I thought, I bet this would look beautiful in sterling silver. So I did the conversion with a lost wax casting. It's quite a complex technique of reproducing a wax by burning it out from a mold and then casting into the mold. So this one piece was really beautiful, and maybe you read the story that I used my wedding
I did. I thought you melted down your silver wedding presents. Did you tell the guests that you didn't know? Of course, they didn't know that. And that's what you used, right?
Well, I'd been married a long time.
I see.
And these were still at my mother's house in a box, you know. They were bonbon dishes. And I was not a bonbon dish type, so.
So you melted them down and made jewelry.
Melted them down.
That's great, great. So the nature, though, has played, the images, the impressions of nature have played a major role in your jewelry. You've gone on to do other
Well, I think
like
that the fascination with nature is, you know, the structure and the form of the piece. And it's not simply copying a shell or copying a bone, or, but it's like, you know, deconstructing it and finding a new side of it, maybe that people are not accustomed to seeing. So I just use it as a investigative jumping off platform, and that's the way I've worked with nature. I've also worked from ideas from architecture, because architecture in itself is reductive in terms of its use of nature, like the Greek order. Corinthian is from the acanthus leaf. And so I think the way I work by collection, and the collection can be as small as maybe 8 or 9 different pieces, or as large as over 65 pieces, which I have done some where I just get really carried away.
How often do you do a new collection? How often one come out? I know you've done some specific ones that they're named collections, if you will. How often does a new collection come out?
Well, at least one every year, if not more. And each of them is really part of the diary of my life, because they're based on interests I have, or experiences that I think I learned from, and there's beauty in interpreting it in precious metals. And also, I sometimes do special commission pieces for a cultural organization, a nonprofit, or something to do with the city.
I think the ones that talk about the history of the city, I'm looking at the ones that you said architectural ones, have a special resonance, I think, for people that have moved away perhaps from Louisiana, and they bring them home to them.
Well, I think the idea has, you know, a broad appeal, and the necklace I'm wearing is called Ironworks, and it's based on the iron balcony of the Cabildo. And this fan-shaped pendant on the gold chain that I'm wearing is from the center of the balcony. And that ironwork is wrought iron. So there's a difference between cast iron and wrought iron. And this was designed and made by Marcelino Necklace. He was, and I named the pieces for him. This is called the Marcelino Necklace. And he was from the Canary Islands, and so must have come over during the Spanish period.
Well, much of the work, the architecture of the French Quarter is Spanish, is it not?
Because it burned
absolutely
all the French buildings except for the Ursuline Convent and St. John's Legacy, I think.
So, as you look across all 40 years of these, are there any things that stand out, especially to you, that you say, "Oh, I almost not you never forget." It's sort of like your own children. You're creating these things, but are there any particular pieces that you especially are proud of looking back on?
Well, some of the early pieces I hark back to because there's so much energy in it. I was very driven when I started, and I'm still driven. But then it was like nothing stood in my way. I had to do this, and I was playing with the idea, since I had studied sculpture, I was playing with the idea of a necklace that can be worn in different ways so that the person wearing it can be part of the design process, so that it goes full circle. And I designed this method of, I call them slide necklaces, and you can adjust the decorative elements by sliding it on the chain, and it's a continuous chain. And the two ends are the decorative elements, and by moving those, you're moving the chain. You wear it at about a 30-inch length or all the way down to like a 46-inch length.
Well, I think certainly you have been so involved in, you say, fashion design, design for a period of time, and certainly Louisiana, New Orleans has been had so many tragedies that's happened to it in recent times, the hurricane and now, of course, the BP spills and things have taken place. Your work, your art has spoken to that and has helped raise money for things, has it not? Something you must be very proud of.
I am. I'm very proud of the post-Katrina pieces that I did. Actually, I had done the fleur-de-lis years before, because it is the symbol of the city. And I love New Orleans and like to celebrate the beauty. And so the fleur-de-lis I had in a collection of bracelets, rings, all celebrating that design. And when Katrina hit, the first few weeks, I was very confused about what the rest of my life and the lives of the people that work for me, what would be happening. And so I called the Lieutenant Governor's office, which was Mitch Landrieu at the time, and suggested that I be part of the recovery. And so I designed very affordable little pin. We call it the Rebirth pin. And we sold literally thousands of them, and I dedicated a nice percentage to the Cultural Economy Foundation.
Well, preservation has been important to you. Preservation of a city, preservation of a culture, and you did it in a very tangible way too. Your original house, where you had your original designs and factory and sold things, you gave to the Preservation Resource Center. And that was, why did you intentionally do that?
Well, it was a very old barge-built building, a two-story barge-built building. And at the time I was renovating my home, and my contractor looked and he said, "You know, that building is going to fall down." I didn't want to sell the building because I was afraid that someone would tear it down for the location. So I decided to give it to the Preservation Resource Center, because they would sell it to someone with a pledge to stabilize the building, at least stabilize it. And that is what happened. And the story is another come full circle story. The man and his wife that bought it, she is a designer and he's an architect. So luckily they had stabilized it and are now occupying it. And that was before Katrina, because it would definitely not be here today.
Well, certainly you've your artistic work has also been part of Mardi Gras, which everyone thinks of when they think of New Orleans. You've done all sorts of designs for krewes, have you not, through the years, and do you intend to do that in the future ever?
Of course, I love Mardi Gras. That is something so unique that we have in our culture. And the whole way that the masked ball has a theme. And I was invited to design crew favor in the beginning. I think it was the crew of Mithras.
Yes.
And Osiris, Comus, and just the word spread, because it was, in this way, it wasn't like the idea didn't come from me, but they had a theme, and I found something in the theme to use as a motif for the crew favor.
Well, you have plenty of energy, it looks like, left. So what do you have looking immediately in the future? What do you hope to accomplish?
Well, I'm already working on a new collection.
Great.
And a lot of people want to know if I'll go back to doing clothing. The answer is no.
No. That's a very
because
direct
what I'm
answer.
interested in jewelry is that the work is timeless. And I use precious metals and precious or semi-precious stones, whereas clothing is a more temporal kind of design. And I think I will stick with jewelry.
Well, I think that those of us who have a few of your pieces, that's absolutely true. We'll pass them along to other generations because they are timeless. They're things that you want to hold dear, and we thank you for your time and for your talent and for being with us
Oh, well,
today.
thank you, Beth.
Thanks so much.
It was my pleasure.
And thank you all for joining us on Louisiana Legends.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or go online to www.lpb.org. Funding for this program was provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.